This is the 46 of 46 podcast summit session, where we'll talk all things Adirondack, backcountry, and beyond. From high peak stories and adventures to trail tips and tricks, we'll dive deep into the heart of these mountains and the people who passionately climb them. Adirondack maps and spruce traps to bushwhacks and backpacks. It's all here on the 46 of 46 summit sessions. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 46 of 46 podcast. Summer is in full swing now. We've finally gotten a break from the nonstop rain here in the ADK. I've been able to get out into the mountains. It has been fantastic this past week. A little bit of rain, but that is to be expected every week. But we have had tons of nice, sunny days, and it's been fantastic running around the high peaks and the high peaks region. But this week I am back with a summit session, and my guest has kind of been on the show before, but not really. Her name is Sara King, and she hiked the final section of the Northville Placid Trail with me a couple years ago, so you can hear her name and our story hiking the final section together of the Northville Placid Trail on my Northville Placid Trail series. And she is an absolutely fantastic person. She does huge days in the high peaks and all over the Northeast. She is an absolute beast on the trail. And this week I have her here on the Summit Sessions to tell me all about her recent Wakely Dam Ultra that she ran. 55 kilometers or just over 34 miles. Speaking of the Northville Placid Trail, yep, the Wakely Dam Ultra. So she is here with me tonight to talk all about that race, why she did it, how she trained, what it was like running through that stretch of the Adirondack Park, and how she pushed herself to complete 34 miles. It will be a fantastic story, and I'm super psyched that she is finally a guest on the podcast. She is a great person. Her name is Sara, and Sara, welcome to the 46 of 46 podcast Summit Sessions. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, James. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. It's an honor to chat on the podcast. You've been a huge supporter of pretty much anything I've been doing the last couple of years via the podcast and everything else. You even came out and hiked the Northville Placid Trail with me. So I appreciate all the support that you've given me. It's an honor to have you here on the show. And I genuinely mean that. Thank you very much for supporting all my little endeavors in life.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inspiring me.
I appreciate that. You do the same. You do the same. So what have you been up to lately? You're always out just, we'll get into the Wakely Dam Ultra in a bit, but you're always out crushing huge days in the high peaks and all over the Northeast. What have you been up to this summer in terms of, the mountains?
This summer, in terms of the mountains, I've been out there trying to get some bigger days, working on training for Wakely. So time on feet was really important for me. Got out and did the Seward Range and got out and did Allen. I was lucky enough to get out and do both of those with some new people that I hadn't hiked with before, which is one of my favorite things about hiking in the Adirondacks or anywhere really, is the community and the camaraderie that you can find out there. So just doing what I can. I've done a lot of trail running too, obviously, in training for Wakely. So I've spent a lot of time actually in Moreau State Park, so a little outside of the Adirondack Park, but still down, close to it. And just working hard to hone in on noticing, what my body does while I'm out there for long hours. And like I said, time on feet, really focusing on getting those miles in.
Yeah, and you spend a lot of time in those mountains. So I'm pretty sure have you done all of the Northeast Ultra 8 lists?
I have, yes.
Yeah, of course. So just to give the listeners, an idea for the types of days you're doing, you've done all 8 of those. So that should give you an idea as to the type of beast you are out in the mountains. I applaud you. I respect you. Those are not days for me. I can assure you of that. I have not done any. I guess I've done the Great Range Traverse, but in terms of the rest of them, there are some pretty daunting days on that list of ultras.
And I love that list.
I know. You all do. All you people who are out crushing these huge days, you just you live for it. And I think that's so exciting. It's so exciting.
I enjoy doing them once to see, what the experience is and get a really good idea of what to expect to go back a second time. And I like to bring new people with me when I go back a second time. So I'm actually working on that now too. Checking off the round 2 of the Northeast Ultra 8.
God, that's so great. That is just fantastic. I mean, for me, it's like after I do a huge day in the high peaks, I'm like, yeah, I'm good for a bit. I don't like these long days. And then, of course, you go a couple of days and you kind of forget the pain that it was. But I've found, as soon as I get home from those big days, I'm just like, I'm done. I'm good. My feet hurt. But that's amazing that you're already you get home and you're ready to do the next one. You guys do lots of big back-to-back days too. It's crazy. All of you people out there, all you listeners, Sarah, all of you people who do back-to-back days in the high peaks, it's really impressive. And as somebody who spends a lot of time in the high peaks, I don't really do many days back-to-back in general ever. I mean, I also live here, so I just like go hike one day and then I go home. But when I see these people coming up to the park they're here for 3 days and they just do like 3 monster days in a row in the high peaks, I'm just so impressed by it. I'm so impressed by it every time. And you are one of those people. So it's pretty wild what you guys do out in the mountains.
I agree. It is impressive because getting up the next day after a long hike is really hard. Convincing yourself that you still want to do it when you're feeling so fatigued from the day before, it can be tough.
Absolutely.
But it's absolutely worth it. And I think especially if you're talking about training for something bigger than what you're doing in that moment, that those back-to-back days really do help with your conditioning too.
Yeah, certainly. They certainly also help with conditioning your feet, because I find for me, and actually we could talk about this for a second. I find for me, the biggest factor is my feet. Usually, my heart rate, great. My muscles, fine. It's the feet that are just toast. But also, I have like pretty cheap hiking boots from what I see in the world. You, however, you work at a store where you work at a footwear store. So you actually, on the Northville Placid Trail, were informing me about different things about shoes and feet and all that stuff. So you're actually kind of an expert on the subject of the proper footwear for hiking.
I've learned so much about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
In fact, literally, since we did the Northville Placid Trail, so I do long days at work. So my job at work, usually we work 12 to 14-hour days. And since our conversation, I never wear the same pair of shoes 2 days in a row, because you told me that, is it like it takes 24 hours or something for a shoe to like get back, get its padding back or something like that? What was the statistic?
Yeah, so we like to give our shoes a 24-hour rest. And the reason for that is because the foam in the bottom of our shoes compresses, just like the foam on your mattress or on your couch cushions. When you first, like, for example, when you first bought your couch and you would sit down on the seat, you stand up, that little dimple where your bottom was pops right up underneath you. But after some time has passed, that dimple stays and it takes longer to take its shape again. And eventually it stops taking its shape at all. So same thing happens in our shoes. We have foam in the sole of our shoes. And when you're walking on them, especially if you're adding even more weight with a backpack or, rocking or something like that, you're adding even more compression to that foam. And it just takes time for it to rebound. And so if you don't give your shoes time to rest, and you're walking on compressed foam all the time, you set yourself up for, discomfort at the minimum and possibly injury at, the most. So it's a good idea to interchange your shoes if you can.
Mm-hmm. So now people who are doing big back-to-back days, let's say you're backpacking, most of the time people just have one pair of shoes. So I guess in those scenarios, it's just like, it is what it is. Is there, do you have tips and tricks that people could employ for those situations when they are doing back-to-back days, unless it's just bring a second pair of shoes?
Obviously, bringing a second pair of shoes would be ideal, but I know on some of the bigger treks, like if you're out there through hiking, 100 miles or more, and you're cutting weight, going ultra light, it's not really an option to carry 2 pairs. So
sure.
My best advice would be to get those shoes off as soon as you can when you're done with your day, whatever your day looks like, so that they have some time to rest and get your feet into something that allows your feet to splay out and really relax, like Crocs.
The best.
Yep. Crocs, Birkenstocks, all those really attractive feet shoes there are really good for you at the end of a long day. So I do highly recommend just getting those shoes off as quickly as you can.
Sure. Now, I actually always have an additional pair of inserts in my backpack that on long days, or if they get wet, and they're a totally different insert than like what came with the shoe. So I've actually found, and it's I don't know if it's in my head or not, but pretty sure it works pretty well. I've found when I put a different insert in my shoe, in my boot, when I'm out there, suddenly it does feel like I'm wearing a different shoe, at least on, where the shoe touches your foot, where it rubs. It kind of helps kind of minimize foot fatigue. That's a little tactic that I've used over the years and implemented pretty successfully. And
I think that's a great advice too.
Yeah, it doesn't weigh anything in your pack too. And if your shoes do get soaking wet and they won't dry, at least at that point, the bottom of your feet can be somewhat dry, which is the prime location of what's touching the ground. But anyway, so let's get into your background a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into the outdoors? Where does the Adirondack connection come in? You spend a lot of time running around these mountains. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So I was thinking about that question actually leading up to this. And I think my story is a little different from a lot of the people that you've talked to in the past, because I didn't grow up hiking in the Adirondacks. I didn't grow up backpacking. I didn't do a lot of outdoor activities beyond probably like the fourth grade. When I was very small, my family and I, we would camp. It was always in a camper, at a campground. And we would, go fishing, do some of those basic outdoorsy things, but I wasn't hiking mountains. Like I said, I wasn't backpacking. And so I really didn't have it ingrained in me the way some people do. So fast forward to, I'm in my early 30s, and I have had my annual physical with my doctor, and he surprised me by saying, "You have high cholesterol. We don't know why. You're 30, you're not overweight, you seem to, be active." At the time I was working as a nurse, so I was on my feet all day. So he's like, "We got to figure out something to get your cholesterol down." And so I told him I wanted to try exercise before I took any kind of a medication for it, and he agreed. So I kind of went in cold turkey, having not been an athlete even most of my life. Even as a kid, to talk about athleticism, when I was a kid, I played peewee soccer, peewee t-ball, that kind of thing. But I didn't really pursue much for physical activity beyond 10th grade all the way up until my early 30s. And so cold from scratch, I decided it was time to get going with my physical health. And I started doing workouts at home with Beachbody. Actually, I feel like it has a different name now. It's been a while since I've looked at any of their programs. But I started with programs like P90X and Insanity at home. And I chose those because somebody told me at the time that I should at least give it a try and appreciate that I was doing it at home. So if I needed to, I could stop the tape anytime I wanted to. I could pause it. I could take as long as I needed to get through that workout, but just to try to get through that workout. And I was encouraged to take a before picture and then take another picture at only 2 weeks. And I thought 2 weeks was really fast, because I thought, well, how in 2 weeks am I going to see any results? And when I went ahead and did that, I sure enough saw results, and that was enough to keep me motivated. It certainly wasn't easy. It certainly wasn't pretty. I couldn't keep up with the tapes all the time, but as time went along, a couple of years went by, I got better and better at it. I got in better shape, and I met somebody who was working on finishing their 46. And so I got introduced to the Adirondacks. Really just kind of by accident. I hadn't heard of the 46 High Peaks prior to that. And we decided that, I was going to join in on a hike for the Dix Range. And I guess the rest is history from there. I found that hiking was a different kind of peacefulness to me, compared to the peacefulness that I might find just being at home, reading a book or or even zoning out watching TV. I felt much more in tune with myself and with the world around me when I was out in the woods and, without the distractions of and the noise of everyday life. And so that's how the Adirondacks came in. That's how I got started hiking the 46. I made it my goal to finish the 46 high peaks by the time I turned 40. And 2019, I was at 30 high peaks, and it was May. So May of 2019, I had 16 high peaks to go, and I met James Griffiths, who I think you have interviewed before. And he started talking to me about crazy long hikes where it was 10, 12, 14 high peaks in a single day with 10,000 feet of elevation gain and being out there for hours and hours. And I thought, man, people really do that. And then he started putting names with the people, and I heard names like Claudia and Nancy and Amanda Riggs and Shannon Pinkowski, and it got me thinking, like, gosh, these are real people. And I saw their pictures. I could find them on Facebook. They're really doing it. Could I do it? And then he invited me to do the Saranac 6 with him. The Saranac 6 is a great ultra because you're in and out of the car for almost every mountain. And so at any time, if you decide that it's too much, that you're too tired, you're too hungry, you just want to go home and get warm if it's cold, or it's too hot and you're just done, you can choose to stop at any point. Where something like, the presidential range, you're out there on trail and to turn around, it's going to be a long walk back to the car. And so we did the Saranac 6, and I caught the bug. I wanted to know what else I could do, what else was out there, what was my body capable of. And how could I turn what I was doing into either fuel or a resource or a lesson for my real life? And that has ultimately been the true benefit of these long hikes beyond, the physical aspects. And it's just been truly a metaphor for life, and being able to recognize that those challenges that you face out in the mountains are really no different than the challenges you face on a day-to-day basis. And it's where I just feel like my most authentic self.
That is a beautiful answer. And I say it all the time. There are so many lessons to be learned from these mountains if you will listen to them. And that just parallels everyday life so much. There's so much to unpack in your answer. And for starters, the fact that your first high peaks was the Dix range, and then it didn't scare you away. That kind of shows you right off the bat that, yeah, this is indeed for you to start with that range. And to go back further to your answer, the fact that you said, no, I do not want to go the pharmaceutical route. I want to make lifestyle changes, doc, before I do anything. And that you made those lifestyle changes to affect your personal and physical health. Anyone who knows me knows when you said that, I had a gigantic smile on my face as you were telling that part of the story, because that is what I am all about, making the appropriate lifestyle changes to dramatically improve your physical health. First and foremost, lifestyle is key. So congratulations to you, and I commend you. And again, just so much respect for you for making those decisions, sticking to it, pushing yourself. And now look where you are. I mean, I feel like at that time when you were popping in those P90X tapes, if you were to tell yourself at that point where you are now, you'd probably be like, no way. I got to press pause right now. I can't finish this tape. There's no way I'd be doing, ultras and doing these gigantic hikes in the mountains with tons of elevation gain. And it's look where you've gotten, because you haven't stopped. It's very inspirational. And I applaud you for putting in the work. I mean, that's quite frankly what you're doing. And you said it yourself, it changes your mind. It changes your mindset and how you approach not just what you're capable of physically, but how you approach problems in everyday life that you learned to deal with by pushing yourself out in these mountains. And it just gets me so fired up to hear that story.
Yes, that's exactly it. You say it so well.
Oh, thank you. You said it first. I'm just kind of, paraphrasing you, but so let's talk now. Let's talk about this recent race of yours, the Wakely Dam Ultra. So that is a 55K. and which is just over 34 miles for anybody who does not know. And tell us a little bit about what that race is. So if you are Northville Placid Trail hikers, you'll know Wakely Dam. If you don't, it is it's kind of like centrally Adirondacks area, more or less. But yeah, tell us a little bit about what the Wakely Dam Ultra is, how it came to be, and just a little information about it for what we don't know, and then we'll get into your experience on it itself.
Sure. The Wakely Dam Ultra has been around for a long time. I want to say something like 25 years. I know there was somebody at the race who has run it for the last 14 years. So it's been around for at least 14 years. And Kimberly and Doug Gardner actually are the race directors. There's no organization or anything like that it's sponsored by. Those two folks doing the whole thing, and they work with actually some of the rangers in the DEC to ensure the safety of the runners. So given the remoteness of the trail, and the distance, you're starting at Wakely Dam and you're running about, like you said, 34 and a half miles to the Pasico Airport. The whole time you're traveling on the Northville Placid Trail, so you're following the blue trail markers, easy to follow for the most part. And then as you get closer to the airport, you jaunt off to the left onto the Foxy Brown ski trail, and then you pop out into the woods and start heading to the airport. Super fun race. It is. It's a race that gets capped every year. So meaning they have a limited availability. It's a limited access race. It typically sells out within the first 20 minutes of their registration opening because it is also a coveted race. People do, look forward to running this race because it is challenging and remote. The other piece of it that makes it so different from other ultra races is that it's 100% self-supported as well. So there are no aid stations, there are no water pit stops except for the water that you're going to filter. The aid station is whatever you're carrying on your back for the whole trek. So that makes it unique and adds a special spice to it too, being self-reliant out there.
Yeah, and you're also, it's a trail race, so you're in the woods, and this isn't running on pavement. You are running on the trails and the elements, elevation gain, roots, rocks, the whole shebang. It's pretty impressive. Walking that trail alone is challenging enough, let alone running it all in one day. In fact, so you said it went from Wakely Dam to the Pasico Airport, which would have been, for me on the Northville Placid Trail, that would have been day 5 and 6 that I hiked with Jonathan Zaharik, because we went from Wakely Dam to Pasico, the road crossing, where you eventually met up with me for the next section of the Northville Placid Trail. So now I'm getting a nice visual of, where the race was. So very cool, man. That's just so great. So how many people competed? I know you said that it sells out, which is just so great. That is just my sort of vibe right there. But how many people competed?
They allow 60 people to run the race.
Wow, 60 people. That's incredible.
60. Yep. And they have asked in the past if they could increase the number of participants. And it's a hard no from DEC.
I bet.
Resources obviously are a concern. And, they have a great safety plan, going into it. The Rangers make sure that Kimberly and Doug know if something goes wrong, where are you going to take somebody? What are you going to do? Who are you going to call? Obviously them. But, that's a piece of it too, is having, a preparedness plan should somebody need help.
Yeah, sure. Now, what's it like when you're out there in terms of, when you're running a race on the road, you can pass people pretty easily, but you're on a trail now. So what was it like kind of in that regard with, let's start with the start. Obviously everyone's starting, so it's like pretty crowded. It needs to kind of spread out a little bit, but passing people on the trail, sometimes hard enough walking, let alone, in a race mode.
Yeah. And like you mentioned before, this trail is, it's pretty rugged. In the racing world, it's considered technical. I feel like the definition of technical in hiking terms and racing terms are slightly different. But in racing terms, it's considered technical because, like you mentioned, the mud pits, the rocks, the roots, there really isn't much of the trail that you're not encountering something like that. And so it's a single track trail pretty much the whole way, except for the first, I want to say it was like the first mile and a half where you are on a dirt road. That's the nicest section of the trail. I definitely appreciated that once we headed into the woods. And quite honestly, I had heard in years past that there were sections of the trail that had been flooded out or washed out, that people were up to their waist or even their chest in water. And so I knew going into it, there was a good chance that I was going to be extremely uncomfortable. But that was part of it for me, was that piece of it, getting over that. I know I'm going to be uncomfortable and I'm still going to keep going. I'm still going to do it anyway. And that's something that I want to be able to apply in my real life, which is part of the reason why I choose to do these kinds of things. And so you get started out on that dirt road. Like you said, there's a large group of people. There's a lot of energy. It's very hard to slow down in that because everybody's so excited and going pretty quickly. And then it does start to thin out. And I think it actually thins out fairly quickly because of the technical aspect of the trail. Some folks glide over that stuff very easily, like deer, and other people need to really slow down and pick their way through, and they speed up between those sections. At about I would say 4 miles in, we encountered water up to our knees with grass up to our shoulders. I think that was somewhere around that the swampy area by Cedar River.
Yeah, dude, it's so funny you say that because I've had here in my holster ready to ask you about that Cedar River area because I remember crossing on the Northville Placid Trail with Jonathan Zaharik, and we were like, dude, this area sucks. And it was desperately trying not to fall in and get just absolutely demolished with water. So tell me about that section. I'm so happy you mentioned it.
Well, that section, it just, because it came so early, I paused right at the edge of the water and I just kind of laughed and I said, well, okay, it's all or nothing now. Like I can turn around now and easily go back to the dam. They're still there because I knew there would be people at the dam waiting for about 2 hours in case somebody wanted to turn around, and or I can just go through. And I just pushed through, and you just kind of laugh and tell yourself this is what it's going to be. Like, buckle up, sit back, embrace the suck. I heard a lot of people saying embrace the suck, and you put your mind in a place where you just, you start to accept the discomfort, but also pay attention to if it's the kind of discomfort that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
You're building perseverance too in those moments. And that's, you do that long enough and over again, and you've clearly built that from all of these long days you've done in the mountains. So you do that time and time again, and suddenly it becomes kind of business as usual to put yourself in that mindset of it's going to be hard and that's okay. I'm going to keep going. So when you got to that wet river, this is the type of river or type of swamp, I should clarify for people listening if you haven't hiked the NPT. This is the type of swamp where there's just so many dead trees all in the water, and you're just desperately trying to find a route across. I believe the stretch of trail was probably 100 yards. And when Jonathan Zaharik and I did the NPT, I think it took us a half hour to get across it because it's just looking for every step. And at that point too, it was the first day of that section. So yeah, we also did not want to get super soaked. It was pretty wild. Did you actually try to get across it and not get wet, or did you just say, nope, I'm just going to walk in and get across and just get soaked?
Just sent it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Send it across. Because at that point too, you have so much running left to do. Your stuff will dry. It'll just be you'll be a little wet and muddy and gross for the next mile or two.
You're a little wet. You're a little, feeling gross. You're a little bit heavier. That's something, especially even with lightweight trail runners, when they get wet, when they get mud on top of them, it does take a while for things to shake out. So that's something too. I actually really appreciated having hiked the Seward Range a few weeks ago, because the Seward Range was it was a mud fest when we were there. And so all day, feet were wet and muddy all day and very, very heavy. And I appreciated after that hike that my legs felt sore in a different way. And I could only attribute that to the added weight of the wet shoes and the mud that was on top of them. And so I think that actually helped me at least mentally understand what was happening when my legs started to feel that weight of my shoes just at like mile 4. I was like, oh, okay, that's okay. You're still going to be okay because you hiked the Seward Range that way. You're fine.
Sure. The Seward Range. It's a beast. Did you do Seymour as well that day? I'm assuming.
We did.
Yeah,
all 4 that day.
Of course you guys did. You're not going to just do the Sewards alone. Come on. Of course you're going to also hit Seymour. So now that section of trail. So as I'm thinking about it, remind me. So that section, which is what this race is, which is again the section I did with John. Does it cross any roads, or is it you go in at Wakely Dam and you don't come out to a road until you hit Piseco?
You don't come out.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that is back there. Oof. So like if you decide to quit, miles in, 10 miles in, you're still walking out. There is nowhere to really bail. Whereas like, you do a marathon, you just get picked up. There is nowhere to bail. So that is so cool. Oh, I like this race even more now that I know that information about it, because it is remote. It is rugged, and there is no turning around. Once you start running, there is no going back. So that's exciting. Oh, very cool.
So they have 3 rangers that'll actually be placed, randomly out on the trail. They don't know where they're, like, we're not told ahead of time where they're going to be. They just go out there and they do their thing. And so you could go, if you needed help, obviously, there's somebody could get to a ranger if you couldn't, or you could walk to a ranger and say, I'm done. And they would obviously assess the situation to see, could you walk out? Would you be able to turn around, or would it make more sense to just keep moving forward? Or would you need a rescue? Like, I know that in the past somebody was injured on this ultra, and they got a boat ride, so that they could get out a little bit faster, that kind of thing. But yeah, short of, coming up on a ranger and saying, hey man, I'm not feeling great, and him saying, keep walking, that, you're self-reliant.
Mm-hmm. Oh, big time. And at that point, you're hiking a section of the NPT. Have at it. Enjoy. Enjoy. Cool. No, that's exciting. Did everybody finish? Did some people not finish? What was that statistic like? Do you know?
As far as I know, everybody finished this year.
Very cool. That's great. Very cool. So now what was it like as you said the herd started to thin along the dirt road, which makes sense before you really go into the woods. Now, what was it like during that, the woods portion for, because you really are on your own, as I mentioned on the podcast recently, I did this half marathon here in town, and you have like the aid stations and the energy and this and that. And then when I was on one portion of it, the River Road portion, there isn't that. And the vibe is completely different. It's just everyone in their own heads and, running their own race. So that's what that entire race is like. What was that portion of it like for you because you really are, and it's 34 miles. So it's a long time to be you versus you and just you with you. There's other runners with you, and you do have that energy, but it does wear off, and it is a point where it's like, okay, now I have to take over. That kind of excitement's done. So how did you handle those moments?
I love both parts of that question. So I think the herd really, really started thinning out just before that 4-mile mark, just before all of that water. And then I think that water really separated the pack because, like I said, there's some people that are trying to go through there really carefully with careful footing, like you said, trying to find a path if they could. Other people are just sending it right through. And I think that just really, really put some distance between some folks. And as you got deeper and deeper into the woods, honestly, I was a little surprised because I wasn't sure what to expect in regards to would you have other runners around you, but I was surprised I didn't. There was a couple of girls who I did play leapfrog with for a little bit. They were running together. Very nice women, both of them named Jen with the same exact last name. I thought that was really funny, and so did they. So a little bit of leapfrogging there, but other than that, it was really alone. I was alone for several hours, and that was new to me because, as you know, I don't typically hike alone. I typically am out there with at least one other person. And so that was really unique to get into that space where it's like, all right, there is nobody else's energy here, either positive or negative. And there's nobody else here to talk to me, to say things to me that I might need to hear. This is it. This is me. Like I need to be completely independent in this moment right now and make this happen for me. Nobody's coming to save you kind of went through my head. And so, the herd thins out. There's really not anybody that I'm passing anymore. You're going through, at this point, you're doing a lot of up and down, a lot of undulating hills. First section, there were some good parts where you were able to get into a groove and you were able to run a good distance before you came up to, some muddy sections. But after the halfway point, it got a lot harder. And I don't know if you remember this at all about that section, but it seemed like the muddy sections, the muddy pits, were closer and closer together. So that last section was really challenging to get any kind of a running rhythm. And I felt really fortunate because around mile 21 or 22, I actually came upon another amazing powerhouse of a hiker, Amanda Riggs. And she was there actually switching out her socks, and she and I stuck together until the end of the race. And we conquered those mud pits together, and both of us saying the same thing, like, man, like it would be nice to be able to run and actually stretch out the legs. Cause at that point you're a little fatigued, and running actually feels a little bit better than walking. And we just weren't able to, because you would run for, 25 yards and there's more mud and you have to slow down and pick your way through the rocks. So it was definitely a unique time for me to go that far alone. And it made me appreciate and recognize what community really does, and how it can positively affect both your mindset and, your ability, to be honest. The positivity and the encouragement of others really goes a long way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's you guys are all you got out there. So, being each other's cheerleaders is I dare say, yes, I understand like these things are races and people are technically racing, but most people are just there to finish. So at that point you are kind of all on the same team, and that it goes a long way when you start clapping for other people and cheering them on. And then also, it boosts you up too, even if you're down and you're struggling and you're, in a rough spot mentally or physically, it'll boost your morale at just as much. So it keeps the vibes positive. What was it like with the mileage markers? Like, were there mileage markers throughout, or did what was that kind of like, I guess, logistical element of it like?
Logistical, the only thing I had telling me how many miles I was in was my Garmin.
Oh, gotcha. So it's just like, here's where we're starting. See you at the end. Hope you make it. Gotcha, sort of thing.
Yep. They send somebody in for a few miles at the beginning of the course. And then they send somebody in for a few miles at the end of the course the day before, just to check things out. But that's it. Like, they look at like the first 3 miles and the last 3 miles, and that's all the recognizance that they've done. So yeah.
Doesn't get much more Adirondacks than that. Oh, I love it. It's so rugged and just like down and dirty, but that's our brand. That's what we do here in the ADK. Oh, that's very cool. Very cool. And I saw your video at the finish line that you posted on social media, and I noticed Amanda Riggs finished right before you. I was going to ask if you guys were just coincidentally finishing at the same time, or if you had run somewhat together. Amanda Riggs has also been right here on this podcast before, in case you're wondering. Shout out to Amanda, and shout out to James from earlier. But yeah, that's fantastic. So were there any moments throughout the race that you had, to really dig deep, to keep going, keep yourself in it, not let yourself get down? How did that portion go?
I'm kind of chuckling as you're asking that, because while I walked away from the race and I still feel today like, wow, what a great experience. That was so much fun. Definitely from probably like mile 18 until I bumped into Amanda, I was I was over it.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm not gonna lie. At around mile 15, I had picked up another runner who I came upon was sitting on a rock and he wasn't feeling that great. And I slowed down, even though I knew that there were sweepers and there were rangers there. It's just not in me to leave somebody who's not feeling well somewhere like that isolated. And so I asked him if we could walk together and go through a few miles together. And we did. And then when we got to a water crossing, we decided to part ways. And so it was after I parted ways with him, I was trying to, get back into my head of where I was before that, of the strength talking, the really encouraging myself, you can do this, let's go. And I was having such a hard time with it. I was really just like, you know what? You don't have to do this. Who are you doing this for? And it was just that little gremlin that was saying, you're tired, you're hungry, you're sticky. You'd really like something other to drink than, river water, all of these little things, popping up that, I didn't even realize had creeped in until they were right there. And so, yeah, probably from mile 18 until I bumped into Riggs around, it was mile 21 to 22. It really took a lot for me to just say, keep going. And when I realized that my negative thoughts and my negative self-talk was starting to outweigh my positive, I did take a pause. I said, all right, need to take a deep breath because you're starting to go down that road where this is going to turn into misery. And this isn't misery. You're not hurt. You're not starving. You're not dehydrated. You're perfectly fine. You're tired. So I kind of told myself, you can, and so you should keep going. And eventually was able to get back to talking a little nicer to myself. And that's when I ran into Riggs, and we just stuck it out together right through the end. And even in that last, I think there was 3/4 of a mile to go to the Pasico airport. And you jump off the Northville Placid Trail to get on the Foxy Brown ski trail. That ultimately comes out of the back of the airport. And ski trails are very different from the trails we hike on. Ski trails are not maintained when it's not winter. And so that ski trail was, and Amanda is a little bit shorter than I am. I'm not a tall person. The grass was over our head. The water was up to our knees, and it smelled a lot like cow manure. And both of us just said, and it was raining by that point too. I'm so glad that you're here to do this with.
That's great. That is great. That is an inspiring moment and story that you told about getting yourself to keep going. And what an amazing thing when we push ourselves and we don't let ourselves go down that negative path. Whether you're out in the woods, it's hard to do. It's hard to not just say, this sucks, I'm done, and then just keep going down that rabbit hole. But eventually you do have to, grab yourself and pull yourself up and get yourself, switch that mindset. And that is a mindset that is built. That is a mindset that is, kind of earned over time by not giving in to those gremlins, as you called them. And you clearly showcased that in an absolutely epic and amazing way. And so what was it like running with Amanda Riggs? So were you guys chatting throughout? Were you yelling to one another? Or was it just more of just you're up there, I'm right here, we are together, separate, but still together? What was that kind of dynamic like?
The funny thing is, we ended up chatting a lot more than I expected. And I think it was because we were at that portion of the trail where it was just hard to keep up a consistent running pace between the mud pits. The undulating hills were one thing. You kind of deal with that. That's challenging because you're, having to go up and down. If you've ever done any kind of hill work, it's just a lot on your body. But yeah, we were just chit chatting. And I feel like that kind of just kept our minds occupied. We were even talking about what races we were going to do next. We were already kind of there. I think because also we have done such large hikes before, and we've done ultra hikes before, and things that required 18 to 24 hours to do, or even longer. We just knew that our only option was to keep going. And you're going to fill the time either with misery, or you're going to fill the time the best that you can. And I would much rather fill the time, with something that brings me joy, over walking out in misery. And that's, like you said, it's a practice. It takes a lot of work. I haven't always been able to do that. And it's really something that you choose to do. You choose to find the joy in the pain and the discomfort that you're feeling in those moments, whether it's while you're hiking or while you're running a marathon or a trail race or an ultra marathon, whatever it is. It's about deciding the story that you want to write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a mindset that you earn from doing it over the long haul. Absolutely.
Yeah, and eventually you don't have to try so hard. It just happens naturally.
Yep. And that's it. And it's like, that is exactly it. You've taken the words out of my mouth. It becomes business as usual. It just becomes what you do in those scenarios, and what a great place to be. And I always say, I do a lot of training. I do a lot of, working out or sweating or hiking or whatever it is. I like the sweating. I like the heart pumping and this sort of thing. And I get so many people asking me, well, why do you do it all the time? And it is physical and it is mental, but also to me, like you were talking about, with deciding not to go down the negative rabbit hole and to have a good time and switch it to, okay, let's have a good time instead of a miserable time. It is a privilege to be able to get out into the woods and to run and to, push your body and to be able to, move your legs and, sweat and like cover this amount of distance in, 34 miles. Like the fact that you can do that, it is a privilege. It is not to be taken for granted. And it's like when you kind of have that perspective shift, these things aren't so bad. They're like, yeah, this sucks. It's hard, but it's also awesome at the same time, even though it's still really hard and it's raining and it sucks and I'm wet and I would like to be dry, but is it the worst thing in the world? Are there so many worse things happening to people out in the world? 1000%. It is a privilege to be able to do this. Are there people who aren't able to physically be out here? Absolutely. So, it's a mindset shift and perspective change. And once you kind of make that switch, it affects every part of your life, but especially when it comes to grinding things out in the mountains, in the gym, in your personal lives, wherever.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And the word privilege is, I think, the perfect word, because it is a privilege. And I did think about that while I was out there, because I know people personally who would love to be able to do a race like Wakely, or even a hike like White Face, or, a half marathon in Lake Placid. And they're not able to at this point in their lives. It's not to say they'll never be able to, but at this point, they're not able to. And then, of course, I know some people who will never be able to because of age or other situations. And so I definitely appreciate that my body's able to do this. And I appreciate it even more because I, like I said before, was not an athlete when I was younger. I didn't play team sports. I wasn't a competitive person by nature. I'm still not a competitive person by nature, except for challenging myself to, stay consistent and improve to the next best thing that I'm shooting for. It is such a gift to have a body and a vessel that allows me to do these things.
Absolutely. Now, what's on your radar? What is the next thing you're thinking about doing?
Oh, dear.
I know there's probably something, fish swimming around in your mind.
I have a couple of projects in mind, a couple of things in mind. As of right now, I know for sure that I would like to do the Endurance Society Sky Run. That's at the beginning of October in Vermont. They offer a loop-style marathon distance that's a 4-mile distance loop. And the marathon distance is that loop until you obviously get to the marathon mileage. But it's somewhere around 14,000 feet of elevation gain. So you're climbing a mountain every time you make this loop. So that's on my list for the beginning of October. And the beginning of November, Mountain Dog Running is putting on the Moreau Lake State Park half marathon. Again, they do that each year. So I'm looking at doing that. So that'll be my first half marathon on trail. So that's exciting.
Very cool. So now what have you done in the past in terms of, what is your racing history like? What are some things you've done in the past?
That's a funny question, James, because quite honestly, as far as running goes, I've done a handful of 5Ks. I have participated in 3 Ragnar races. So Ragnar is a relay race. They happen all over the country. But I did 2 years, I did the Adirondack Ragnar, and 1 year I did the Cape Cod Ragnar. And that's a relay style for a distance of about 200 miles, and you had a team of 12. So I did that. And I've done 2 half marathons on road, and I've done 2 15Ks on trail. So I went from having done my first 2 15Ks this year to running this weekly 55K last weekend. I have never really called myself a runner. All those races and events that I've participated in the past have really been more so because somebody said, "Hey, you want to run this with us? I think you could do this." The experience, my 5Ks have been with my family, which is always fun. I really enjoy being active with my family. So I honestly, I've not done a whole lot, and that's part of it too. I think that's the message I hope that I convey to people, is that regardless of age or experience, you can do things. It's literally your mindset. Like we were saying, if you tell yourself that you can't, if you tell yourself you're too old, you're right. But if you tell yourself you can, and you're willing to put in the effort and the work that goes into it, understanding that you're not going to be great at it the first time you do it, you're not going to be a professional the second time you do it, and that you're going to need to give yourself time to grow and improve, just like everything else you tried for the first time, you can do it.
Absolutely, 100% the truth. And that is a fantastic place for us to start to wrap up this episode. Sara, you are an absolute inspiration. Love what you're doing. Love what you did. The fact that you had never done anything remotely close to this, and then you did it. And you finished. And I mean, my God, I mean, if people don't realize that they are so capable of so much more, and they're capable when they get their mind in the right spot, and they just keep pushing, you just keep on trucking one foot in front of the other. It's amazing. It's amazing how far you'll go, and where your body will take you, and where your mind will take you when you go along for the ride. Absolutely fantastic stuff. So as we close up shop, I like to ask the guests these 3 questions before we stop, and I'm going to ask you as well. There's no wrong answer. Whatever it is that you feel is the correct answer is the correct answer. But the first question is, what is something that is unique to you that you always have in your backpack when you're out there hiking? What's something that's just very personal to you, fun, maybe necessary? What's something unique to you?
So definitely not necessary, and perhaps not even really fun. But years ago, my mother gave to me, I want to say it was a Christmas gift, a very small, probably the size of a $50 bear, actually, a figurine of a bear. And I keep that in a small bag, and I take that with me on every trek. You might actually see him pop up on my Instagram. He's been Bear on the Summit before, but usually he stays tucked inside. And that bear actually came with a small card on it that read Burden Bear. And the story behind it was, this is your burden bear. And, whenever you're feeling weighed down by burdens of life, talk to the bear. Like I said, this was years ago. Tell the bear your problems, and the bear will help make them all go away. And so it was kind of like, I don't know if you remember back in junior high for us, there were these things called worry dolls, and the girls would have them, and you'd tell them your worries, and you'd tuck them under your pillow, and the next day you'd wake up and all your worries were gone, kind of thing. So same idea with this burden bear. And probably 2019 was when I decided that I wanted to start carrying him with me on my treks, because it's right in line with times where I started doing more challenging hikes and harder hikes, things that scared the crap out of me. And I always found it comforting to have something with me that came from my parents, who I'm really close to.
I love it. I love that answer. I have a I have a purple heartstone and my the note that my wife left on my backpack the morning I finished the 46. The purple heartstone was from my daughter June, and she said, "This is for putting in your backpack when you go hiking." She was probably, I guess, 3 at that time. So that comes with me. The note comes with me on all my hikes. So I have a similar kind of, very personal item that goes with me in the same regard. Very cool. And that bear probably comes in handy too on those wet days when you're still 8 miles back and you need to talk to the bear and say, "All right, bear, so my feet, they really hurt. They suck right now. They're really painful. I want the rain to go away. I'm really struggling with it." And you tell the bear, you let the bear take care of it. And then you say, "Okay, I vented. I got it out. Okay. All right, let's go." I'm sure the bear comes in handy for those moments.
Now I can move on.
Yes, exactly. All right. Question number 2. What makes the Adirondacks a unique place in your mind? What is it about this place that makes it so special?
I thought about this question even before I knew I was going to talk to you, because I've asked myself that question. At first, before I had the chance to travel much outside of New York State, I really thought that it was just special because it was a place that I could go and I could be away from everything man-made, and I could find quiet, and it would be a place that I could go to be uninterrupted. And I thought that it was, one of the most rugged places as well, one of the most challenging places that I could go. I've since, traveled to some other places. I've been to Yosemite and Yellowstone, done some hiking in both. And my heart always still comes back to the Adirondacks. And I think the piece of it for me that makes it so unique is because of the things that make it challenging. The drainage trails, the trailheads that are, 6 miles from the base of the mountain, the river crossings that don't have bridges. It's all of that, like we've said so many times already, it's a metaphor for life. There's going to be times in your life where you're going to be a lot farther away from your goal than you want to be. There's going to be times in your life where the bridge that you expected to be there isn't there, and you have to find another way to get to the next step in your journey. And I just think those challenges, those things that people often complain about and say are negative about the Adirondacks, are exactly why I love them.
Mm-hmm. God, I love that answer. I could not agree more. God, that is exact. It's just, you articulated it very, very well. And now, final question. Why do you hike? Why do you push yourself? Why do you do these monster days hiking, days, 30-mile days with 10,000 feet of gain and just like all these huge days? Why do you do it?
I feel like I have a lot of different reasons. I think if you had asked me a few years ago, the answer might have even been different from the answer today. But my answer today, for sure, I hike, number one, because I can. I want to see what I can do. I want to see what I'm capable of. I want to see as much of the world outside of the 4 walls that are around me as I can. And being able to use my own 2 feet to do that allows me to see things that I might not be able to see if I was traveling by car or boat or something like that. And so I appreciate that. Walking slows me down. It makes me really take in my surroundings. It lets me soak up the vitamin D and the energy of the forest and everything that it has not been created by man. It's an outlet for me for stress when I feel like I'm overwhelmed by whether it's tasks at work or tasks at home. The to-do list is never ending, right? When I feel like I just need a break to slow down and breathe and gather myself, it's a place that I can go to do exactly that. I get to choose my path for the most part. I pick the trail that I'm going to travel. I can choose how far I go. I can turn around when I want to. There's a lot of things that involve choice when it comes to hiking that you don't necessarily experience in your everyday life, right? Because we don't always get, choosing to go to work isn't always our most fun option, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's something that brings me a lot of peace, a lot of joy. And it's also something that, I really enjoy sharing with other people. I can appreciate that some folks aren't able to get out, and some folks really wish that they could. And the messages and even phone calls and things like that I get from people that say, thank you for sharing those pictures. It was beautiful. Or thank you for telling that story. I felt like I was right there. That's a big piece of it for me too. So to not only fill my cup, but to help to fill the cup of others. That's why I'm out there.
That is fantastic. Sara, thank you for sharing your journey on the Wakely Dam Ultra, your journey, from, your P90X videos to where you are now. Just an inspiring thing. The words that you said, very inspirational, and so much truth behind what you said. Now, where can people find you online so they can connect with you further?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. You can find me online. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Instagram as Sara Jane, Jane. Is it called the handle, James?
Asking the wrong person.
I'm showing my age now. Spunda_sass. So it's SPUNDA _sass, SASS. That's my Instagram handle, if that's what it's called these days. And on Facebook, you can find me as Sara King.
All right, there it is. Sara, thank you so much for coming on the 46 of 46 podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure hearing your story from start to finish. This was a very fun episode for me. So many smiles for me as I'm listening to you tell your story about persevering, pushing yourself, and experiencing the Adirondacks in a whole new way. It was absolutely fantastic. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Summit Sessions here on the 46 of 46 podcast. If you like the show, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen. Head over to 46of46.com and check out what I have to offer there. I have guide services. I have an ebook guide to how to climb the 46 high peaks. Great resource for you if you're starting or you're underway in your journey through the 46 high peaks, and lots more. Again, that's 46of46.com. Find me on social media at 46of46 podcast, and check back on Fridays for new mountains, new stories, new guests, and new episodes right here on the 46 of 46 podcast. Remember to always leave no trace, do the rock walk, and if you carry it in, carry it out. See you all on the trails, everybody.